I was thinking the other day, Jeremy, what are the boots and shoes that I've worn? And I remember those shoes would stink. And I'd have to look at them and say, I got to put those on again tonight to go back.
Not only because your sweaty feet, but the fish was dripping off.
Yeah, it's just awful. If I don't want to put those on anymore, I've got to go better myself. And I don't care who you are in this land.
Hey guys, and happy Father's Day. This is JSlay, Made in the USA. I'm Jeremy, and you're about to watch a conversation between me and my father, Gary. This is not meant to just blow him up, but it is Father's Day, so maybe we can, one time a year, cut him a little slack. But if you know him or you've watched any of the cursor videos that I've done, you will know absolutely that he had a rough childhood. Alcoholic father in the home, absent father most of the time, and really no outside help. I didn't include this in the video you're going to see, but they were even on food stamps for a while I was very young. Just watch the video. It's really good, and I'm excited about what you're going to see, and I hope it does provide hope for all those who are watching this video. Happy Father's Day, and take up the mantle responsibility and get it done, dads. Those are just terribly difficult odds for those particular people groups to have success when their children are, 70 times as likely to end up dropping out of school, in prison, whatever. But take us back again. So I talked about your drivenness, and I know this from knowing your story so well, but you having a father that was an alcoholic. I remember I would see books on your shelf when I was even in high school, and it would say, the problems with being the son of an alcoholic. And I think it was speaking to people like yourself who were exceptionally driven to not be what they saw growing up. And I know that had echoes through the way that you raised us, both for the good and the bad. Tell about that a little bit, because you had a fire in you, Dad, that I think everybody that knew you knew about.
I became a Christian about the time we moved to that new town. So, about the time all hell was breaking loose in my house, when my dad took a job on the road and would be gone for a week or two at a time and then show back up, he had just checked out. And from probably 12 years old to the time I accepted Christ, to the time that journey began till about 17 years old, he just went on a serious downward spiral. And there's more to that story. It's a great redemption story, as you know, about how we came together many years later and had a wonderful ending to his life.
Well, let me say this, because I do want to come back to it. You were praying as a boy, God send a man.
It's interesting. To drown out we didn't have internet, we didn't have cell phones. So there wasn't all these distractions that kids have now. But I had a little cassette player, and I had two little cassettes. One was by a group called Creedence Clearwater Revival, and one was Three Dog Night. And it had a couple songs I loved. And I would literally put that in the cassette player in the bed, and I would listen to that to drown out the yelling and the noise and what was going on. And my mom's a saint. She was sweet. She hung in there as long as she could, but I wanted to drown out the noise. And my prayer, because the day I got saved, ironically, in this new town, at a little church there near Paducah, Kentucky, there was a group of musicians that came, were a bunch of past addicts. And they told their story. And I couldn't hear much about what the preacher said from week to week. When I would go with a friend, I'd got invited to Sunday school church. Just didn't hear much. But boy, when they came and they told their life experience and they wrote songs, I heard everything they said that day. So that particular day, I walked the aisle of a little Baptist church, and I knew God was calling me into his kingdom. And that journey has never stopped from that day forward. It was sealed in my heart. Made a lot of mistakes along the way, but I've never had a doubt about my personal salvation. And so, I would pray in my room at night. God, he's not going to hear a preacher probably. He's probably not just going to go to church and change. But if he could hear those kind of guys, if we had someone like that speak into him, maybe this would change. Maybe he would get better. Maybe our family would be whole. Maybe he could lead me as a son that my father could. And so many years later, the story, he sent a man. And
who had his own story of addiction, and he was a pastor of a small little church,
yeah,
right?
Fast forward 40 years, God was faithful to answer the prayer.
Well, it was a beautiful ending, and I remember at the funeral when you spoke and you told your father's story. I mean, I don't often cry, but man, I was in tears because I'd known Pap my whole life at a distance. I mean, he'd occasionally come visit, but we all knew here was a guy who had wasted a lot of years and hurt a lot of people. So let's talk about that for a second. So, as a father, the Bible talks about, I think it's the Lord will visit the iniquities of the father onto the son and second and third, maybe the fourth generation. And I don't think God's saying, I don't read it this way, that he's saying that the son and the grandson are definitely going to struggle with this because I'm purposing that they will. I think it's just the general, like, hey, this is the way the world works. If you have these things inside of you, whether it's alcoholism, which I've at times battled it, you've at times battled it. If it's lust, which I've definitely had my struggles there, I know you have as well. There's an effect, I think, that happens. So I guess the question I'm asking you is, with your knowledge of where, and I'm not trying to beat up on Charlie. I'm not trying to beat up on him. But with his life, how do you know how that probably affected you in terms of alcohol, lust, different things that we know that he battled? Mind sharing?
Yeah. Well, back up.
Okay.
I know many more things now than I knew when I was a kid. A piece of the story I didn't tell earlier that you're aware of. About the time that I made a decision to follow Christ, about the time my dad hit the road and his problem began to spin out of control, of all things, my dad set me down on the couch one day and said, son, you need to know, I'm about 12 years old. All this is about that time frame. In this new little town, Grammy and Gramps won't be living together anymore. That probably for me was the arrow to the heart, the pain of that loss. I didn't know what to do with that.
That was the firmest foundation you had, right?
That was the solid rock. That took me completely by surprise. She was married to a man the next day. I know things about my grandmother. She was a fine lady, but she fell to the devil's temptations, and she, I found out, had a drinking problem. She had a drug problem. She had a man problem. She lived a long life, and I think she made her things right with the Lord before she passed away at 92 or 3 years old. Our relationship was never quite the same after that. I still loved her. I still spent time with her. I kind of sided with my grandfather, and he went into deep depression after that. I don't know the whole story, but bottom line is, in my family, it's a series of divorces. It's a series of womanizing or vice versa, and it's a lot of drinking. It's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of addiction back there. So when you come out of that, I made a firm decision. Probably when I was about 16 years old, I met your mom, and we began to date. And here's this beautiful girl with a wonderful family. And I really didn't know what a home, a godly home, and just the smell of no cigarette smoke, and just
and four pretty daughters too. It's probably perfume everywhere.
Here's like, I had hair like yours back then. Here's this long-haired kid that's a good athlete, and I'm dating Susan McDonald at the time, and Fred McDonald, my father-in-law, he's your Paul. He's one of the finest men I've ever known, one of the godliest men I've ever known. So I latched on to him, and he gave me books to read. I didn't want to be dumb. I wanted to be, because I didn't try in school, but I made a decision. I'm going to read. I'm going to get educated. I'm going to break this cycle. And man, that is a tougher challenge than it would just be words that you say. That's a lifelong journey that we have to battle one day at a time. Because we all have our pulls. We all have our struggles. No one's exempt. But I do think, to answer your question, Jeremy, back to that, I believe when you've come from that kind of environment, I don't think God puts a curse on people, But I think there's some generational stuff there that we have to deal with in patterns that we've grown up or we've seen. And even though I didn't even drink when you guys were coming up, I mean, I didn't till many years later, began to have a few beers or whatever. But I think I still had the tendencies of a performance-based alcoholic style of a father in some ways. We do these things and we do it right. David with the sling and the stone, we kill the giant. That's kind of the way I went with performance-based living. Took me a long time to understand that and to get through it. My brother, and I don't think Barry, he's 5.5 years younger, I don't think he would mind me mentioning his name. He went a totally different route with the pain of his childhood. Now remember, when I'm 12 years old, he's 6.5. So he didn't really have those bonds with Gramps, with my dad. But he just sort of shut down. He just became the guy that didn't feel anything. So people do different things with their pain.
Yeah.
But the bottom line to this whole thing is, for me, there is no greater position or calling than being a husband and father. None. You can soar to the heights in your career, in your whatever your endeavor is. But if that you're climbing that ladder and that's all it's about, you're going to end up there somewhere on the top rung and realize when you get my age, and now I'm Pawpaw, and I've got these 4 wonderful grandkids that look at me as Pawpaw. You look back at your life, and I regret some mistakes. I regret some things I've done, like we all do along the way. But generally speaking, I think with what I had to deal with, Mom and I probably did a pretty good job of holding a marriage together that'll soon be 40 years, from high school sweethearts to raising a wonderful son who's got a wonderful wife and 2 wonderful little boys, and a daughter who's a wonderful Christian girl married to a good man with 2 wonderful kids. Those things, when you look back when you're about to turn 60 years old, that's what you evaluate. Yeah, I had a great career. I lived the American dream. I mean, I was thinking the other day, Jeremy, what are the boots and shoes that I've worn? Because everybody's got to wear a set pair of shoes. When I was 11 years old, I started my first job in a restaurant, a fish place, cleaning dishes. And I remember those shoes would stink. And I'd have to look at them and say, I got to put those on again tonight to go back.
Not only because you're sweaty feet, but the fish was dripping off.
Yeah, it's just awful. But you got to put them on.
Yeah.
You got to go back. And then you paint as a teenager, or you roof, or you whatever you do. There's a set pair of boots over there. Chopping tobacco, picking tomatoes, working at the grocery store. You got to decide, am I going to go put the shoes back on today, or am I going to quit? And I think you've got to decide, if I don't want to put those on anymore, I've got to go better myself. And I don't care who you are in this land. You can drive a truck. You can be no matter what you do, there is opportunity for advancement to educate yourself. My little brother Barry, he didn't finish his college degree, had a very successful career, got a wonderful family, adopted 2 children because they couldn't have kids. Lived so proud of him. Lived a great life. He just dug in and said, I'm going to read. I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. And I think that's out there for everyone, particularly in the environment we live in now, where we can't find help. You just got to put the boots on. You got to go put the shoes on and go back. You got to try.
Yeah. And this is not meant to be a political interview whatsoever. But, when you say this land, there is a difference in this land and other lands where those pair of boots may be the only ones you have to wear your whole life, because there's no opportunity for advancement.
That's right.
America is known as the land of hope. It's been known as a land of opportunity. Yeah. But right now, I've talked to my pest control guy, African-American guy, great dude. He came over last time, and I'm like, how's your business doing? He's like, man, it's we're stagnant. And I was surprised, because now that COVID's passed and they can get out and do the work, and he just said, we're competing with our own government, because people now have realized they can stay at home, collect the check, and then go drive Uber on the side and make more than I could pay them, because they've been taught not to believe in those ideas of, if I just bring my best every day with some hard work and creativity. That's one thing I saw in you as a salesman, with all kinds of customers. It was not just, I'm going to go out and work hard. That was a huge component. Yeah. But you always talked about creative ways to get in the door, creative ways to do this alongside a belief in yourself. And I would have to point to that in my own career in sales after baseball, is that creativity is kind of comes from a positive outlook. Whenever you're negative, there's studies on the brain. If you're negative, your brain waves kind of shut down and you're not creative at all.
That's right.
So I saw that in you. It's one of the things that I learned from having a good father at home with that kind of modeling is, man, you can go out there and get it done. You can advance and you can have fun with it along the way. So it's not just a hard work and sweat story and a stinky fish shoes. I mean, it can be a lot of fun.
It can be. Yeah, creativity, I think, comes from desire. You can have a lot of knowledge. You can have goals. You can have a lot of things. But if you've got the desire and will to try, you can. I'm speaking of young African American men. I met a fine young man the other day. I went in to have my truck serviced, and just got talking to this young man. And he had only been at the car dealership 30 days. And we got talking. He was asking me questions about what I'd done in my career, and I was asking him things. And he had been in retail. He's about 27 years old, just got married, and he'd been in retail for a long time. And he said, "I just want to try something different. I wanted to try to meet a lot of people and learn some sales skills." So now he's at a Chevrolet dealership. They don't even have any trucks to sell right now, he said. I mean, they can't get chips to go in the trucks to sell, so they're selling used cars. And I just admired him and told him I admired him for what he was doing because he's growing. He's got a desire to achieve and do more. And that's what it's all about. Not that it's all about making money. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about going out and doing what you do and doing it well every day. And if you do that and you manage your money properly, you'll probably be successful. And that's been, your mom and I lived kind of under our means for many years. We just wanted to get out of debt. I'd been in debt since I was a kid, and we chose to get debt free and lived under our means. And now I retired 2 years ago, and I'm still active and doing a lot of things. And but I'm not bored. But at the same time, I think those seeds that were sown early in those decisions have allowed us at this point in our lives to be in a good place and enjoy retirement and enjoy our grandkids.
And be able to give. You have the time to give. I mean, I know it's Father's Day, but my mom gave voluntarily for 20 years to young women who were in desperate need. And that doesn't happen if there isn't some success to work from. Right. Or else she's going to have a job, and there's no problem with that.
Right.
But out of the abundance, you can give, and I think that's in some ways kind of the point. And I want to touch on something else from your life. I've noticed a leaning in toward young men. You've even told me that your mission, and somewhat your life mission, in some ways, is to go out and help younger men change the world or change the next generation. For the good. And I've seen you do it. I've seen you do it, whether it's being associated or involved with Fellowship of Christian Athletes or taking a young kid under your wing throughout his entire childhood. I mean, we know who that is. And, or being associated with like Daryl Worley, the country singer. And he was reaching out, and I can't remember what it is exactly, but he's involved with helping those young men who have lost their fathers due to American wars.
That's right.
So do you think that part of
A Soldier's Child?
Yes. Is that what it's called? A Soldier's Child?
We had him out here to the farm, and he did a concert right here in this room and gave of his time. It was wonderful.
Yeah. So do you think some of that comes from your experience as a child and understanding the value of a father? And if not a father, we got to have a surrogate in there, or the community of fathers that can step in, an uncle maybe.
No question. For me, unfortunately, I just didn't have that uncle or that coach. The preacher, I didn't really know him. I mean, he would pour into us as a congregation, and I would listen as I was a teenager, but I just didn't have that guy that I could go to. And I wanted that. I needed direction. Fred McDonald, my father-in-law, was the first man to do that for me. And I know what that meant in my life. And so, yeah, one of my greatest passions, matter of fact, this morning I have two young men that I hadn't talked to in a month or so, but at some level I would consider them sort of spiritual sons. And I just felt led to pray for them and text them both that I was thinking about them and did a little dialogue. So nothing gives me more joy than seeing young men and women, have some direction and find the Lord and know how to walk in His ways, because that's what changes lives. And ultimately, I think individual hearts of fathers, hearts of families, will change hearts of communities, which will change hearts of counties and states and America and the world. I think it starts with a man, just like I asked for in my prayer. So that's what I want to be for someone, send a man.
So these days we live in a time where it seems like feelings reign supreme. How you feel is how you should act off your feelings. Whereas I grew up, yes, sometimes we dipped into that ourselves, but I think for the most part, it's let's look at the situation for what it is. Let's talk about what are the facts of this. What's reality say first? Let's base our feelings off of reality and feel as strongly as you want, but know what's reality first. That's kind of being pushed back on hard in general. I want you to talk for a minute, and I think I might know when this would be, but I think every husband and father, when it hits, like, okay, time for playing around's done. And this is not going to be easy. I've got to wear the mantle of loving my wife when maybe I'm too tired, I don't feel like it. I've got to be a father and spend time with my boy even though I'm beat, whatever. And a lot of fathers will run to the liquor store or they will do one thing or the other. And I think we've all had little bouts with that, but we don't give ourselves over to it, right? We come back to what's reality and what do I really care about? What was the hardest moment for you? Moment being maybe a year, 2-year period. And what was that like? So pick out the time in your life when you most easily could have said, you know what, my feelings tell me this is too much. It's time to get out of this.
Well, first of all, great question. And I think that is the question of the day, because I think men, it's too hard. They've decided it's too hard and they're checking out. Whether that's once she gets pregnant and do I marry her? No. Once she gets pregnant and I do marry her and a year in, I didn't sign up for this. This is too hard. 10 years later, that decision when my career's rocking and rolling and some sweet something at the office looks better than her and we go crashing down, raise the kids, get them out of high school, now they go to college. That was my goal. Now I'm out of here. Whenever that is, it's a hard for me to answer. It is. And this isn't making more out of me than there is, but for me, that really just wasn't in the equation. I guess that decision was made early. Now there's been times when I've not treated your mother like I wish I would have. There's been times I've hurt her and didn't know it. She's come back at me and said, we need some change.
Yeah.
She stepped up and said, we need some change. I mean, I was rocking with my career, managing people, selling, getting accolades. I was going. I would say that would have probably been the time where maybe I could have gotten off track, was right when things were the best, the very best.
Let's stop there, because your answer actually was beautiful. I was thinking you were going to pick a certain time, but the fact that your relationship to God and the way that infused your life dictated that it wasn't part of the equation. I think that's what everybody needs to get to. Is that like, hey, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to relieve myself of these responsibilities. So I'm not going to let relieve myself of these responsibilities. But think about this for a minute. So I was 1 year old, and here's what he didn't say. And I think because he was being honest, it wasn't an option. So you're having you're finishing school at the time. You rode your bike to work, right?
Yeah.
You were on a roofing crew, right? Am I right? You're tearing off coal tar pitch roofs.
Yeah.
So basically you got nothing. Your dad is MIA. Your mom can't help. mom's parents had just gone through bankruptcy.
Yeah.
If I'm
80s,
correct.
he was in the car business when interest rates went, believe it or not, 21%.
So there was no help.
It was gone.
The government wasn't sending you checks.
There was no help.
Right? And
it was brutal.
yeah, but you say it never entered the equation. I think because you loved me, you loved my mom, you loved the Lord. So it just, like you said, it wasn't part of it. And I think that's the missing piece. I mean, if we got to get back to the root and the source of strength, it's got to come from the Lord. It has to come from God, because if you didn't have those things, right, it may have been a very different story, a very different mentality.
Yeah.
You know, but another point you made that I love is it was only when I attained success.
It was at the height.
The height. So like David on the rooftop looking down, he sees
got it.
Bathsheba.
You
Usually
got it.
when the king's
You
right
got
off the
it.
war, he stayed home.
You got it.
So I love that. And I think that's a key thing for us to remember.
And I'll say this about that, Jeremy, and this is not necessarily a men's talk, you know, about.
Well, it is fatherhood.
Well, I guess it is. I guess it is. I, for the first time, around 40, 41, 42, about the time you went off to play baseball at Georgia Tech, I welcomed some accountability into my life. I welcomed another man or two into my life to finally be completely known. That is a difficult place to be. The faster a man can get to the place of having a friend, a buddy, somebody to go to battle with, to be able to speak with honestly about feelings, thoughts, people notice changes in you. And it's okay for them to say, hey, you know, I've kind of noticed you picked up some new habits lately I'm not used to seeing. Those are important things. I was a bit of an island. I was on a bit of an island. And I welcomed some men into my life, some accountability. Game changer. That was a game changer. And consequently, I think that's another picture of what God wants out of a father, is for a son to be able to say, I'm embarrassed by this maybe, but I know you love me, and I need to talk to you about some stuff that I'm thinking, going through, whatever. That needs to be there.
Yeah.
But in my case, my friends around me began to help the father speak into me. So we kind of all helped one another. And it was a big piece of that about that time. That was a good move, because I could have sunk the ship.
Yeah, no, and we all saw the change in you. And I know that we've spoke kind of glowingly of you as a father, and we should honor those fathers who stick around and do it right and are great examples. But yeah, I mean, we noticed that you had become hardened by success, and the drive to succeed became a little bit, it was an idol for a while. It was, I've got to hold myself up and my son up. And that's where we ran into some problems.
Right.
But with that accountability, and it was a process, it wasn't in one day, but over 2, 3, 4 years, there was this big flip in who you were. I remember coming home from college, and I would say like, Dad, what's going on here? Like, sometimes I'd be like, I miss the old guy, because I understood him at least. Like, I know how to talk to that guy. You know, and
Rocky.
And even the things that you valued most in me were changing. It wasn't always just, you know, are you going to hit this many home runs? And not that that was always the deal, but it began to hold too high on the trophy case of my life. So the last thing that I want to ask about, and again, this might be a hard question, but with the pushback of culture, of politics, of higher education against manhood in general, against the role of fatherhood, just turn on the TV and you can see the disparagement of a father a lot of times in sitcoms, what have you. The New York Times, Huffington Post, Atlantic, they're putting out articles talking about what's the purpose of a father anyway. And throughout the article being disparaging. I'm not saying you've read those, but you probably see it. Do you think that we just need to ignore that? We need to get involved? How do you feel we should be pushing back at that level, if we should? You know, maybe we just ignore it and do right on our own, or what do you think?
One, I think we've kind of complicated some really simple things. I mean, a boy's a boy. A girl's a girl, a man's a man, a woman's a woman. Biologically, that's just who we are. You know, to confuse, and I understand some of the arguments, but to confuse which bathroom we're going to, to confuse all this confusion really can be simplified. I mean, it's just clear how we're made, male and female. Yes, there are people who are confused about their identity, and I understand that. But that doesn't change what God's best way is. These roads we're going down and these patterns that we're taking on, I think, are very destructive. God, throughout Scripture, gives us so many examples. The book of Nehemiah, that's one of my favorite books in the Bible. Nehemiah, he's surveying the ruins of Jerusalem. His brothers come to him. He's got a cushy job, cupbearer to the king in Persia. And he's got to go back. His brothers come to him from Jerusalem because the city's in ruins. And he hears this, and his heart's saddened. Mm. And so he ponders on it, and he thinks about it, and he just says, I've got to go help. I've got to go do something. And so he goes back, and he goes back to Jerusalem, and he surveys the ruins because the city's basically been burned down, and it's just gone. And they begin to rebuild something. And what's so cool in chapter 4 of Nehemiah is Nehemiah, he's gathered the workers, and they've got trowels in one hand and swords in the other. Great example to me of what a father should be. A defender of the family in truth and a builder out doing the work. And then it comes to a point where the workers are giving out. And you talk about this in terms of, what was the weakest moment. This would be their weakest moment. Mm-hmm. They came to a point they're giving out. And he stands up as a leader of the people, which we need desperately right now, is leaders to stand up and speak out. He says the reason we do this is for our fathers and our mothers and our sons and our daughters. Mm-hmm. And he inspires them. And it says that they then finished doing the work in half the time. Because another thing he said was, if the enemy comes, I'll blow the trumpet and we'll all band together. So God was on their side. And he was instilling godly values in these people, which is what I think we need in America right now. Regardless of your politics, the church needs to come alive. Regardless of your politics, we need to see what the Bible says and see what truth is and begin to move toward that. And this is being thwarted out by the media in so many ways to confuse us and to confuse the minds of the young people. And there's no need to be confused. Yeah. There's just no need to be confused. If you're confused, if you don't have a father and you're confused, I mean, there's 40 and 50 and 60-year-old men now deciding they want to be women.
Very famous ones.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the best way. It's not healthy for the family. It's not healthy for our youth. It's not healthy for our country. I know people will hate me saying that, but I believe it, and it's the truth. And I believe God's way is the best way, and sin is to miss his mark.
What was the line you said that certain men stood up and said, here's why we're doing it? How did you phrase that?
The worker...
They were at their lowest point.
The workers were getting tired. And I could read it to you if I looked it up. But the workers are getting tired. And they need someone to stand up and inspire them to finish the work. Yeah. This city is too important to let the enemy take it over. Yeah. And so he stands up and he says, this is why we're doing this. You can't wear down. It's too important. And I think we're at that place in America right now. We're surveying the ruins. Mm-hmm. We're seeing what's going on. We're seeing the power of the media. We're seeing the power of the cancel culture. We're seeing how they're using race. I don't know a white supremacist. I love all people, okay? But just because you're a male doesn't make you a man. No more than, a car being, me standing in the garage makes me a car. We're confused. We're confused about what a man is, who a man is, and what a man's called to do.
Well, to put it quite simply, we were on the phone, he and I were, about 6 months ago. And it was before I started the JSlay Made in the USA, and we didn't even have the name then. And we're on the phone, and Dad knew where I stood on a lot of things. And he knew the passion that I had for it, the way that I spoke about it. And he just kind of stopped me midstream and he said, why are you so passionate about this? Why are you getting involved when you don't really have to? And I said, because I've got two little boys. At that time, they were 1 and 3, who they're going to be involved in this culture. They're going to be involved in this nation. We don't know when the Lord's return is going to be. Yeah. We don't know. Yeah. And I don't want them to have to, I want the values that we hold to be esteemed values, not values that makes them to be called hateful people or bigots or whatever when their hearts are innocent young little boys. Mm-hmm. So that to me was number one. So when you said that about Nehemiah, they needed certain people to stand up and say, here's why we're doing this for our sons, daughters, wives. That's the reason. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about us being right politically or culture. It's just like, hey, we know what's true. We know what works for time immemorial. There's a reason it works. That's right. Let's stay there and not let all these values be overturned and buried. Yeah. So,
and there's we live in the South. We live in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. We're in the buckle of the Bible Belt. They say, the buckle of the belt, and people are flooding in here.
That's right.
I don't think it's just taxes. I think they're looking for freedom, and they're leaving places where they don't feel free. We have numerous friends right now in our lives who have moved from California. Great people, and a couple.
The coast of California, not just Napa Valley.
Came over here last night. They've been in California their whole lives, and they moved here, and they said, "You just can't believe what it feels like to be free, to be here. People are friendly." They're not just isolated, running back in their house.
And hating other people they don't see wearing a mask outside.
That's what they said.
Yeah.
And so, I hadn't spent a lot of time in California, and particularly in the last year and a half during COVID. But I know they're sure coming in here. And I think it's for more than saving taxes.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
one thing I want to say, Jeremy, that you've taught me, I have a lot of feelings. I'm a guy that cries at movies, and I can laugh hard and bang the chair. But I've seen in you, I've learned from you over time, and your mom has this quality as well, to not let the feelings overtake the truth. Don't stay in there. I saw it in you in baseball. You would just. When you became a professional, particularly in college, you could be emotional and you'd slump and get on a huge run and all that. Yeah. But I saw you as a professional level out and just do the fundamentals the right way. You couldn't control where the ball was going to go and whether they're going to catch it or not necessarily. You just had to have a good at bat every time. Mm-hmm. And so I think to bring our best every day, just like you did as a professional, take care of yourself. Take care of those that you love. Be kind to your neighbor, but be willing to fight for the good, because the day is over when we don't have to stand up for truth.